So the biggest thing about culture is there's no silver bullet on how to build a great culture. Everyone builds cultures differently based on what games we make, what studios we're in, personalities you have in the studios. And the one thing that I've been doing is just talking a lot with founders, CEOs, people that work at great studios over the many beers over the last couple of days, and asking, getting them to try to help us with these problems we have with our cultures. And the one thing that I noticed is everyone has different problems with their cultures. So we're going to dive right in it and talk about 4 or 5 different topics about different cultures. And if anyone has any problems with their culture, we're all friends here. There's not that many people here, so we can just dig in and really dive into that sort of stuff. So we're going to start with 60-second intros for everyone on the panel. They're going to say who they are, who they work for, and what's your first job in the gaming tech industry, and what you did before. How'd you get into games? Start with Lidi. Go for it.
So yeah, my name is Lidi Giroux. I work with Josh at Eastside Games. We're a free-to-play mobile studio based out of Vancouver. I have been working there for almost 5 years now, and it is my first job in tech and gaming. And prior to that, I ran operations for a medical research center that was run by the University of BC.
Hey guys, Antti, Ikalainen from Tampere, Finland, Traplight Games. I'm operations manager over there. It's a producery role with a lot of HR responsibility. Started at, let's say, 10 years ago, QA, the usual route. Started at Electronic Arts. I used to do production jobs, arts management before that. So yeah, that's how I climbed the ladder now. And yeah, let's say I'm a producer. So.
I'm Lisa Weeks. I'm the CMO of Hashbang Games. Been doing that for about a year now, and I've been 20 plus years in the industry. Before games, I was the corporate cosmetics marketing director at Nordstrom. So I was fashion, beauty, retail maven before I became video game maven. I've been working in games for probably the past 15 years now. My first experience was making promotional marketing materials for Xbox.
I'm Erin. I am the culture developer at Graham Games, which is a studio based in Istanbul and London. We make casual mobile games. Excuse me. I've been with Graham for about 3 years now. Before that, I was doing diversity consulting, so working within a consulting firm using big data to address kind of systematic diversity issues. Yeah, and I came actually into Graham as a content editor and kind of ended up in this role.
And I'm Josh from Eastside Games. So we have a studio that's been around for about 6.5 years. We grew from 12 people to 60 in our first year, and I would highly suggest nobody ever does that. Our culture went under a big strain during that time. My first job in the tech industry was I installed high-speed modems. And so everyone in our studios will have different backgrounds, but I think we have to remember that when we are defining culture, because not everyone just came right from university or some sort of game school and then goes right into working into game studio. And I think that's why, as we talked about yesterday at lunch, that game studios are kind of struggling with this, where some startups that make one product are a little bit ahead of the game on culture, or, you know, with some of the big startups that are having problems now, maybe they're not. So the first question is, what does culture mean to you, and how do you define it? We'll start with Antti on that, because I loved your comment that said bling bling hippie stuff with a heart on it. So I think we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, sorry, what was the question?
So what does culture mean to you? Like, how do you define it?
Yeah, culture is like, it means a lot of things, right? So it's a definition of what we are, who we are, what we do together. Like, I think it's a framework for decision making. It's a framework for conversation, communication, and just like, it defines how we approach things as individuals and teams and as an organization, like toward what kind of products we make, right? And yeah, all in all, I guess that's the shortest answer I can give.
Like, is the culture also our games that we make as well? Like, does that define our studios as well? Or is it just like on people that we hire and, you know, our core values? Or does it go deeper than that?
I guess how you want to see it, like how you do it how you do it together, how you define it as a group, right? So you get your leadership, you figure out what your values are, for example, and you know you call that culture, right? You can call it culture, like we make games this way, and these are the games that come out through that type of like our culture makes this kind of games. So yeah, it's just how you define it, right?
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we think about it a lot too is that I think that putting it as a framework is a really good way to think about it. It is something that you can, in any situation, something that you can refer to. It's something that you can kind of base your actions upon and base, you know, I mean, base both, you know, your production on, but also the way you interact with your colleagues, the way you interact with other people from other studios, kind of the way that you present yourself and your company. And it's inherently a product of, like it has to be inherently an organic product of all the people within the company. And it has to be representative of and, you know, created by people within a company.
I think, too, if you have a set of core values that have been decided upon by everybody in the company, then that can also help with conflict resolution at times as well, because then, again, you have a guideline, a framework to work from.
Those were great answers. I have nothing else to add.
So in that, how do you deal with, one of the themes that did come up was people that define these good cultures and people that are working for the studios alike, but how do you deal with, like, say, poor performers in that culture then? They align with all your values, but they're just poor performers. How would you deal with that?
Okay, to use the example of within our culture, we've baked in an openness and honesty around failure and mistakes, and a kind of a killing culture. That sounds really screwed up, but like a system where, as a company, or as a person within our company, you become used to getting things killed, getting things chopped off, getting things cut off before it goes on too long, before like you begin to waste resources. And so that I think that you need to build into your culture a system for dealing with failure and dealing with mistakes, because they're going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had a really good talk over lunch yesterday that where we talked about, I think one of the reasons there's a lot of friction in culture right now is people don't remember the business side of it. That if we don't have successful businesses that make money, then you can have the best studio in the world, but it doesn't matter because no one has a job, right? So you have to make sure that we don't go too far the other way. And there was a theme that there was a time when all game studios were like notorious for having crunch and overtime, and we almost went the other extreme where we don't have that friction of worrying about the business side of things, and we worry about people, and that's really good, but we also have to remember that our core goal while we do this is for our players, for our customers, and we have to do everything to make them have amazing experiences. And if that doesn't happen, then you can have all the fancy culture shirts in the world, but who gives a shit? Because you don't have any money, you can't pay anyone, right? Unless people just want to get paid in hugs. If they want to get paid in hugs, hit me up. What are some of the favorite tips that your organization does right now to engage people, keep them happy, and ensure they have fun at work? And please, nobody say ping pong tables. That's a hot button word for me. I hate ping pong tables.
Does anybody have ping pong tables anymore?
No.
We do.
Yeah, you do? Congrats.
We actually have a ping pong tournament next week. We will film it. It will be online. Check it out. I mean, all jokes aside, like, those things are really important. Having activities with the team. But I think that what it comes down to, and we were talking about this yesterday, is kind of feeds into the last question, is the way that I think about kind of our company and our culture is that, we've created this optimal work environment that both allows people to enjoy themselves, allows people to be happy, but also allows them to be as creatively free as possible and allows them to explore the limits of their creative potential. And so the expectation then is that you create this environment such that the people within your organization work as hard as they possibly can to produce the products that allow for the maintenance of that environment. So like what I try to do and what we try to do is just create visibility of both sides of that. So activities like having a ping pong table, or like we have bars in both of our offices. We do tons of activities and parties and kind of have gotten a reputation for that. But, you know, like we do have a lot of fun as a team, but at the same time that serves as a reminder and serves as kind of a visible kind of reference point for the reason why we work so hard to produce the games we do. Because we want, I don't want to say it's like a movement, but we want to maintain this idea of a company that you can be happy in and also work really hard in. So the things that we do, and then I think that another kind of, you know, key thing that we do is like we talk about our culture openly all the time as like a entity, as like a product. So like we have a manifesto that similar kind of in concept to the Netflix deck or the Valve book, but it's constantly changing. And, you know, anyone can put input on it, and we're going to put it on GitHub soon, but, you know, that is a project that's in the works. But basically, you need to create, and we have weekly meetings and we talk about all of this, is like you need to create the sensation on an individual level that everybody actually is and is contributing to the culture and everyone has an effect. Yeah, so I mean, like, I guess, sorry, I kind of rambled there for a second, but like my answer is two parts, which is yes, the activities and the fun and the enjoyment and, you know, having a friendly, fun, creative work environment is important, but also it's about making sure that that everyone in the organization is talking about culture, everyone's aware of what that means, and everyone feels like they have a part in it.
Right, and you guys also do the diversity, the game jam talk, get people into coding.
Yes, so we also, like, I think a big part of Graham's story is that we kind of started out as an indie studio and pretty much almost went bankrupt at the beginning and had a really lucky break with 1010, which was our last $40,000 of our marketing budget. And just, you know, and that, you know, went to #1 on the App Store. And so we feel that it's really important to kind of take that success and take the luck that we have had. I mean, success and luck, both, and then feed it back into the community. So the two ways we do that is, and actually three, we just did another one, but one is through an indie dev program called 2 Tons, where we take local indie devs and kind of give them support and kind of guide them through like they have usually a product and then we guide them through the process. And I think for people within Graham, it's a good reminder of like why we're doing this. And also it's helpful to the community. And then additionally, we have this thing called the 22% Project, which is kind of a program to equip women, young women usually, with the skills and visibility necessary in order to just kind of start breaking into the gaming industry. So again, yeah, those are like, it's good to always have reminders and representations of why you're doing what you're doing. And reminders and representations of like what you believe in as a culture and as a company.
Yeah, like almost everyone has that as their core value that says, we believe in diversity. But if you go into a studio and you believe in diversity and it's like 95% dudes, it's like, not really. Like, okay, you can believe in it, but like, what are you doing to push that forward? So when I saw that, I was like, we have to meet this studio. We have to be better at that. And we're pushing some of those goals forward at our studio as well. And we're failing at a lot of them, but I think we're at least making progress.
No, yeah, I mean, I would like openly say that it's something we struggle with as well, but that's why we're doing the project. And it's something that we have had problems with, I mean, in having diverse candidates. But the cool thing about a culture in a studio like ours, and I think like all of ours, is that like, if you see a problem, if you want to do something, you are, you know, bestowed with the resources and the support in order to address that and to do that.
Yep.
Which is cool.
Yeah, what we try to do at Traplight, and sometimes fail, sometimes succeed, is to focus on honesty, like really being kind of, try and communicate as well as you can, and just be honest about things, what you see, what you feel like needs to be done next. And then that usually, or hopefully, should turn into just being safe around the environment of like, or your culture is safe. And yeah, that should feed into, you know, all around happiness at the office, right?
So with that, what some of the like what are, say, the top things that you can do in the first 30 days of somebody coming in? So we have some like real takeaways that people that are like, well, I don't know how to, I'm an indie developer, I only have 5 people, what's some of the things I could do after hiring in those first 30 days? Or I'm a big studio and I want to change my culture. So Lidi, maybe you could lead that one off. What can we do in that first month?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you know, this is something that we used to be terrible at, and we've gradually been getting better, and we've been learning a lot. But I think it's really important for people within the first 30 days to have multiple touch points with different departments in different parts of the studio, because it's so easy when someone starts and say they're an engineer to just be on their team and be surrounded by the other engineers and to not really know anything else that's going on in the studio. And I think it's so crucial for to have a greater understanding of how the company works. So within at Eastside Games, we have people cross-training with multiple departments, with community and with marketing. So then they'll just know people in those departments, and they'll have a greater empathy for how difficult the different roles can be. And I think that's really important. So in addition to that, we also have they'll meet with me within the first 2 weeks, and I just go down and I make sure that everything's good, that they don't need any equipment, or that they're happy in their role, or all those things. And then they'll meet with the CEO after 30 days, and that seems to be working well for the new people that we've started in the last year.
It seems like we spend so much time and resources in hiring people and vetting them and make sure that they're a good hire, and then we spend like no amount of time in making sure that they're going to be a good fit after 30 days, or after 60 days, or after 90 days, or 120 days. But we know more about, it's almost like we've become so analytical as studios, we know more about our players than we know about our team. So everyone's like looking at your users and seeing like what they're doing, but for their team, you're not really checking in to make sure it's still a fit, because you kind of have that. We see it as the first 30 days is really essential to make sure people are where they need to be, and that they fit in and they align with our core goals and they're getting their work done.
Yeah, the other thing that we've started doing is, within the first 90 days, there would be some loose goals, but people would get to at the end of their onboarding or at the probationary period and be like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not, and it wasn't clearly defined. And so now by setting up 30, 60, and 90-day goals that we talk to them about immediately, and obviously those will change depending on the department, but people have a really good idea as to how they're doing and how they're progressing and if they're on track. And I think that makes people feel really comfortable and a lot better in their role.
So one of the things we used to fail at Eastside Games was we're obsessed about the first-time user experience for our player users, but for the people we hired, it was like the shittiest experience ever. Like they would come in, they would have a desk, the chair would be broken, there'd be like a chocolate stain on the chair, which is like super gross, and the equipment would all be used, which is pretty much like most studios. So we went back and we copied what startups were doing by offering, brand new equipment, or mice and keyboard right in the box and swag, and made sure they have the best of the best. And the analogy we use for it is, imagine if you checked into the hotel and you're at your desk, there was like a stained chair and like everything was kind of not clean and done up perfectly. You'd be like, I can't live in this. I can't do this. I got to get a new room, right? But it's all usually an afterthought about where the new hire is going to sit, how they're going to feel when they come into the team, that everything's working. And just in doing that, we found people are now like taking pictures of their desk and putting it up on social media and be like, I'm so excited to start. And it's just the one really simple thing that anyone could do. And we didn't do that for 4 years. The experience working at Eastside Games for the first 3 or 4 years was probably new people would come in, somebody would meet them at the door, maybe, and then they would find their team lead and try to find their desk and do that. And it's not like we planned that, it's that we're just always busy and we didn't get around to that. So I think we're better now. I hope we are.
Something? Oh, as a marketer, that absolutely warms my heart, because to hear you say something like you feel like you've grown and had success in people's feelings of that kind of camaraderie and pride of being a part of the studio, so much so that they want to take pictures of their desk and post it on social media. People don't really think about marketing as something that absolutely everyone in the company should be doing. You should be proud enough about your studio to advocate it. And then as a marketer, you don't have to go around and be like, hey, can you guys share a little something on Facebook? Or can you go to our page and like it and share it? You don't feel like you're having to ask people to do that if they already feel pride in doing so. So that speaks to me.
Yeah, I think a conversation that we had within the studio is we developed a similar thing, which is like Graham box. So we have these like branded boxes that we put on people's desks when they come in. And we're like, we want people to brag. Like, we want people who start here to want to brag. And just on this note, just something I'll add is, like, I delegate and coordinate a lot of PR within our company, and people are often confused by that. And I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense, because the brand is the culture. And you want people to be showing the world like what it means to work in your studio. You want your culture to be promoted to the world, and also like hopefully iterated by other studios so that workplaces as a whole better. And I think that, yeah, so, but anyways, yeah, I think it's super important that on day one you just have people who are so excited to start, just even if that is like by means of material thing.
Yeah, probably the cheapest thing you could do is just have somebody meet them, like meeting them at the door to make sure like it's assigned and you meet them at the door, so there isn't that moment of like super anxiousness. And that's I think now that we have that organized, I feel like we get a much better response when I meet them after 30 days to see like, how's everything going? Yeah. 'Cause people are polite. Sometimes they won't ask for stuff that they needed for 30 days, right? Yeah. What about, does anyone have any questions? If they have questions, hit these folks up.
I wanted to ask about kind of the cultural due diligence from the employee side. So if you're thinking about taking a job at a studio, how do you do due diligence on the culture? How do you think for yourself about whether you're going to be a good fit in that particular studio environment?
I always talk about this. I think it's a great question, and I think it's really important, because I think when people go to apply for jobs, they just spam every video game studio in Vancouver, and they're like, whatever, any job is fine. But the culture at our studio is so different than other studios, and everyone is so different that it is a very important question. When people are looking to apply at Eastside, we suggest that they come out to our events and come out to where we're having lunch and meet us and meet the people, because, as you said, it'll have so much more value learning about the culture from an employee's perspective than just like reading a blurb on our website. But yeah, just getting to know the team, getting to know the founders, and asking those questions. And we just went through the process of developing our core values, and I think that's probably the strongest tool that we have to talk about our culture. It's the thing that defines us the most. So reading values, and if they're cheesy and corporate, and that's your thing, then maybe that's a good job for you. But just feeling that you emotionally align with those things.
I think it's also about making the application process more of a conversation than an interview. Our first interview is a culture interview, and we'll sit down with candidates and kind of screen for personality, and we basically extrapolated questions from the core values that we have. And but a big part of that kind of interview is not just them telling me or telling whomever about themselves, but also about giving them the opportunity to hear about what we believe in and what we do, and kind of taking a moment to decide whether that's something that they not only want but could align to or develop, not just align to, but develop in their own right.
Yeah, I think you have a right as an employer, somebody who's applying for a job, to actually like ask how you do things here, and well, that's like. Like you said, a conversation. I personally take a really long time when interviewing people, and take many occasions on interviewing if I'm not really sure if a person is I really need to get to the core of the other person, like who's coming in and does she understand what we do here and how we do stuff. So yeah, communication is key, I guess.
Yeah.
Go for it. I guess for Lidi or Josh, you mentioned you were recently developing the core values. Could you elaborate on who was involved, how that was done, how it was rolled out to the rest of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we took our leadership group, which is our founders, our directors, and then one of the producers and myself. and we rented a room for an entire day, and it looked crazy in there by the end. So we had like big post-it notes on the walls, and then everyone was writing on little post-it notes, and we had a big brainstorm, and then we divided that into sort of some of the natural groupings, and we had some things that we had already been using as sort of our values before that, and so some of those got in, some of those left. And through that process, we came up with, I think, 8 at first. And then we worked with a facilitator to sort of drill down into figuring out exactly what those things mean. And then I worked with our HR director to define definitions for the different values. They're on my shirt, too. You can come see them after. And yeah, the whole process was probably a year to 18 months long, from the initial meeting until when we said this is the final version. But in terms of like input from the rest of the team, we shared them with our seniors group, which is about 15 to 20 like managers, seniors and managers. So they had input. They sort of got a first look before the rest of the studio. We had a small amount of input from them, but at that point, we were pretty much like solid on having those things. So it was just people wondering about the wording and asking for some definitions for some of the things. But how did we roll it out? So every week, so we decided on 6 values at the end of it, and so every week at our Wednesday team-wide meeting, team-wide lunch meeting, we went over a different value, and we had a different person from the leadership team pick which one resonated with them, and they went up and sort of gave their own take on what it is and why it's important and what that means for us and what that means for our future. So that was over the course of 6 weeks. And then, and then we just have it posted everywhere around the studio, and I'm always encouraging people to come up and ask me if they have any questions.
Yeah, I'd strongly suggest you bring somebody in outside of your organization, even if it's just another colleague or somebody that doesn't have vested interest, to facilitate, because actually what happens is you have very passionate conversations with myself and the other founders and some of my leads, and we have to make sure that after this we can all go and say, we believe in this. For us, anyways, with core values, we never had a problem with people that were with us when we were 12 people, and then people that we newly hired because they got it. But there's a huge section of people in the middle that didn't really know that was the core values. It's not like they were opposed to them, but they weren't like strongly for them. So I think that's been the biggest. It's been something we're still struggling with, but we should have done this a long time ago. But the process does take a long time because you're going to have lots of fierce debate on what specific wording you use. So that was money well spent for us to bring somebody in to just define that.
There's also a really great book called Tribal Leadership. I forget who the author is, but it basically details all of those processes, and it does take about a year. And then it's even more of a process to actually roll it out to the team so that it's not put out there in such a way that's like, okay, we sat here in a room and we decided that this was how you're all going to feel now. Now you're going to be really emotional about this, right? So I definitely recommend checking out that book, Tribal Leadership. It's really great.
I read this really interesting piece a couple weeks ago, which is like the steps that you need to take when you pass 60. There's like, and because that, like, generally I think that's considered the threshold for like when you start to go, when you go from being a small studio to a mid-sized studio or company, whatever.
Step 1, lose lots of hair and drink more whiskey, gain 10 pounds.
Sleep 4,
Step 1 done.
Exactly, yep, narrow your diet down to whiskey and junk food. That was long ago. But the big thing was that it was codifying what you believe in is like the first thing that you need to do, because at that point, like, you cannot have visibility on every single person.
Yep.
You cannot, I think that, something that I've talked to a lot of our team about, especially the people who've been there for a long time, is the need to make sure that it's flexible, to ensure that people feel that this is not something they're being told, but that they can actually have an effect on and actually develop as well.
Yep, sure. Sam?
Hi guys, thanks. I'm wondering what you guys do for compensation and how that affects culture.
You mean like salary, or do you mean like bonuses based on that, or everything?
Well, how you do compensation systems and if that impacts your culture, and if so, like just how they kind of intertwine. Like, do you when you're going through, do you look at, is that part of your cultural assessment? Does it impact the way that your culture develops? Does compensation impact the way that you manage your culture?
Great question.
I would say it's the hardest part of the whole thing.
So does anyone have like other startups, does anyone have open visibility on compensation?
The Chinese room has set a salary for the whole company. And it's a UK-based gaming company. I just know that. And they also have 50-50 male-female. And they set a salary for the whole company. Okay. And everyone gets that.
But anyone here, does anyone here visibly publish, like everyone knows what everyone
gets? We don't, it's not a secret what anyone gets, but like, you know, I don't know if it's common to just spread out the information. It's not like visible anywhere as in a document somewhere. No. But when it comes to compensation, I guess, if I understood the question correctly, is that, I mean, if you're talking about salary, yeah, that's a conversation again, like what do you need to survive and have like, you know, to be happy at the office, right? What you can, like, what you live with, and, you know, you don't need to think about money after, you know, so you get paid enough, right? It's about respect. It's about respecting the employees you have and just, like, you know, give them what they need and what they deserve, I guess.
I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble by you, Josh, for saying this, but I'd say the one point that I would add on that is I noticed a shift with us. So we went, we were able to start paying people a lot more competitively in the last year or two, and I think that really made a positive change in our culture. You know, before we had people that were highly passionate about what we were doing and about the studio, and they were willing to maybe make a bit less than some of the other big studios because they really believed in us, which was really cool. But now we have people like that that are getting paid lots of money, which is also really cool. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Sometimes for us, it's more of the perks that we have in the studio or the flexibility we have that some people value more than, that's compensation, but value more than just straight up money. And we can actually see that when we pay out our bonuses based on profitability. I don't have exact metrics for it, but I can say that when I do have my CEO one-on-ones with every single person, more people bring up like some really small perks we have and flexible days off, and we all go work out at the gym together. That stuff is like, this is a real positive, where I get more positive comments on that than thanks for the bonus. It might just be people are just really awkward talking about money, but that's what we seem to get more often than not. So I guess each studio is different, but for us, it's not really the driving force. You have a question?
Hi. Actually, I have two questions, if I may. One, how important is culture being driven from the top down, having a CEO or a leadership that really values it and thinks about company values, or can it be developed more organically from the middle? And then secondly, we've talked about there's a healthy tension of good culture and making money. And have you been able to actually present the fact that a good culture can represent growth and financial positives for the company, or does it have to be kind of just accepted?
To answer your first question, I absolutely believe it's 100% crucial that it comes from the top down. Our three founders embody our culture in an amazing way, and that's the only way that I see it working, at least for us. It is massively important.
Yeah, I don't think it can work unless it's comes from the top down. That's why you need the facilitator to come in, because co-founders they're the worst people. Like CEOs, they're the worst people in the world. They have no idea what they're doing. Every day they're changing their mind. They're always having a crazy idea, and so you get 2 or 3 of these jackasses in a room, and they're just going to come up with all these ideas and not focus on the task at hand. So you really need a facilitator to drill down, and then somebody to hold them accountable. I think when we appointed a team and culture manager, that was a really key point because it's there to keep us honest and on track. And you have to think of your culture as almost like a product as well, right? Like we're talking backstage, it's a product. It's like a game. It has to ship and be iterated on, and you constantly have to work at it.
Yeah, and like, I think, like, for instance, I'm very open about, struggles that we've had, but like, we had an issue when we were in a really big production crunch, and we do OKRs, and this is something that everybody needs to do, like objectives and key results for tracking. And the leadership team, like the block that was like operations and biz was blank. They did not put in their OKRs, and I was just like, the cool thing is like I had the freedom to I just started a Slack group and just shamed them. I was like, guys, this is not cool. Like, you are meant to represent what this company stands for, and if you don't do what you expect other people to do, then there's no reason why they should be expected to do it. And I think that the minute CEOs and leadership stop embodying the culture, you lose the culture completely. Because there's no reason why everyone else should adhere to values if the people who are most visible are not adhering to those values. Basically.
Could not have said it better myself.
Yeah, sometimes there's no saving it. Actually, to start up Eastside Games, we had such a different culture at the old studio. We moved a lot of people over, and we just started fresh. We weren't business thinking. We didn't really have this, so it's like we can take some of the people, but we're gonna have to change some things up. We're just gonna have to start a new thing. And this is what the new thing is. This is what we believe in.
Yeah.
Hi. When you interview people, do you have a favorite question to ask? A culture question?
Oh, good one.
When's the last time you fucked up? And you throw them off with the curse, too. And they're like, oh. Because people are always expecting, tell me about a time that you made a mistake. And I'm like, tell me about the last time you fucked up. And people are like, but it really, if people can straight off come up with an answer, you can tell that they're going to be humble, and they're going to be, but also they're going to be innovative, and they're going to take risks, which is what we look for.
I have a least favorite question. That's, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
I like that question.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah, I don't need that information when I'm hiring someone, so let's talk about the first 2 weeks first, I guess.
Also, people with 5-year plans are questionable genre.
Something that we've done for the last couple of hires is we've done a brainstorming session, so we'll solve a problem together. And it's really, and we'll sort of let the person being interviewed lead that. And it's been really fascinating experience just to see sort of how their brain works and how they problem solve.
What kind of question do you ask them?
What kind of problem would we be solving? We recently hired someone for our admin team, and we were brainstorming ways to make the office more eco-friendly. And what else were we doing? There's another question too, I can't remember, but just ways to, brainstorming ways to engage the staff in some of the other perks that we're offering. Ways to make the office more eco-friendly, and just seeing sort of the answers they gave. And then what we do, at least for our admin team, we also have take-home projects. So before they come in for one of their interviews, they'll have to do some homework for it, and it's also really interesting seeing that part. So those things are a bit more interactive.
I agree with the when's the last time you fucked up. I've done that before too. Then it kind of throws people off.
Oh yeah, it's so fun.
The other thing I like to do to throw people off, and this also kind of gives you an indication of their personality, is I ask them to tell me a joke. What's one of your favorite jokes? Usually people have at least a handful of jokes that kind of come to mind instantly.
I love that. That's such a good idea.
I also really like open-endedly asking people to tell me about themselves. I'm just just give me your spiel, give me your thing. Who are you? And generally, if someone starts off I started college in this year, and runs through every accolade that they've ever had, chances are it's not going to be a fit. But if someone's I don't know, I'm a dude from here, I really love games, this is what I do, I've been gaming since I was 7 years old, and I want to put my all into all of this, and it doesn't matter, your exact ascent or 5-year, 10-year past your plan, but just this is what I'm passionate about, this is who I am. That generally, at least to me, I think indicates a candidate who's going to throw themselves into your company and really develop it for the better.
I actually got hired for answering a question like that because, and this was about 15 years ago before cosplay was as ubiquitous as it is now, and they asked me one of those questions, and I said, well, I really like going to Comic-Cons, so I'm one of those people that gallivants around downtown in spandex. And they were like, done, hired. Okay.
Yeah, it's I think it's really important to know that company's core values. One of our big core value that I fought for that they wanted to take was hustle. And so I want to see hustlers coming to sit across to the table and see if they get the job. So I'm like, what level are you in Trailer Park Boys? Okay, show me your phone. So you better be prepared, right? Because if you have a meeting, then I want to see someone that's, really far deep in the game, and they give a shit, and they're getting shit done, and they really want to work there, because that's going to be one of the things that everyone has to do a little bit of everyone else's job. So you have to really be deep in the game and play, and you have to love sort of what we do. So since we've been doing that, we've been actually vetting a lot of people. And the culture interview now is two things that really changed a lot. One of them has been the culture interview has been huge, and we've been very successful in rejecting a lot of qualified candidates with the culture interview. And the second one is we get 75% of our hires now through referrals. So if people aren't partying with people beforehand or know them or are hanging out with them and pre-interviewing, because the best people that can interview your culture are people that are in it. And so they should have already kind of passed that one stage by the time you see them, to be like, I met this person, they're a good fit, they have this, and this, and they kind of have a champion from internal. So we've ramped up our referrals from both friends and family and internal quite a bit this year.
On the game thing that you mentioned, sorry, the last thing I'll say is we put a lot of stuff out there to indicate our culture, to indicate what we do, to indicate what we believe in terms of social media, in terms of our website, in terms of everything. And if you get a candidate that comes in, I'll ask leading questions along the lines of what we're doing. So what do you think about the genre shift? What do you think about our move to IAP? And they'll be like, if someone's like, well, I played 10-10, and you're like, okay, that was released in 2014. What do you think about then you can kind of you can tell, I think, that someone isn't fully invested in being a part of your company pretty effectively.
Hi guys. Erin touched on this a little bit earlier. Just wondering how you guys see having a strong public brand for your studio, how important that is as part of building that culture and being part of the identity of the people that work there. And if you I guess a small team that isn't publicly that well known, but is that detrimental, or does that make it more difficult to help build that culture internally? Does that make sense?
I can totally take this one as a marketer. I think it's immensely important, and I think it's immensely important too to continue to grow your studio, because if you're not out there in the community actively supporting the community through events or sponsorships of events or cultivating diversity, like sponsoring a women in gaming lunch or something like that, if you're not out there, you're also not going to attract amazing talent. So you're not going to be able to continue to grow and get the wonderful people through referrals and things like that if you're not out there and if you don't have a really active, visible culture brand for your studio. I couldn't support that more.
Yeah, I think we always say, again, this is back to the myself coordinating PR as well. Culture is our brand, but there's this really tricky balance that you need to strike in terms of honesty. Because at a certain point, if you're putting out these are our values and this is what we believe in and blah 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 blah, and we're totally infallible and we are perfect and it's the best place to work ever, both people aren't going to believe you. B, the people within your organization are going to start to resent you, because if there are mistakes that you're not owning up to, or there are issues that you're not owning up to, then the culture fails. The thing about culture that I think is so interesting and why it's such a fascinating thing to work in is that one crack, one little crack in kind of the facade of what you're putting out there can mean the failing of the whole system, because it is so inherently human. But yeah, so I think that it's really important, it's really important to promote your culture, because that's how you build your team and that's how you make better and greater and more innovative games, and that's how you grow as a studio in terms of strength and in terms of size. But yeah, that's why I say, like earlier, like yes, we work on diversity, but I will also openly sit here and say that we also struggle with diversity within our studio, but that's why we're passionate about it. And I think it's just about, yeah, being honest, like you said earlier as well, both within the team and externally.
So what are some things that we can actually do, like right now, that people can take away and say, like, here's some things we could do right now that we can events for the team outside of the obvious things like happy hours? Lisa, do you want to start?
I mean, again, kind of not to repeat myself, but this is something I definitely feel strongly about, is getting out there and supporting the community and sponsoring events or hosting events, running meetups, doing mentorship programs, and maybe fostering some people who've just graduated from DigiPen or something like that and hosting those events. And I think if you include your internal people in a situation where they're mentoring other people, it makes them feel really great in ways that maybe just your regular day-to-day job doesn't make you feel kind of warm fuzzy about doing a good deed out there.
Yeah, if you haven't started defining your studio cultures, start it now. I guess that's the point. Just do it. From the steps that you guys talked about, like you're defining your values, for example, and then spreading them out there. It's a great point. Just sit down, figure out what you really do, communicate throughout, like really honestly again. Like just see what you guys are up, like what you are about, what do you really want to accomplish, and then build from there, right?
And even though I'm being a little bit esoteric in my answer there's still a lot of validity and a lot of value in regular team happy hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And even in a virtual situation, exactly. Yeah. Because even virtually, we do our Google Hangouts with beer, and we're like, hey, virtual happy hour.
We, I think one of, honestly, both of the things are very important, but also, our team gets drunk together, and it's fun, and you learn things about people you wouldn't otherwise, and that's actually really valuable often. Or, if you don't drink, going and doing activities like we do paintball and stuff like that. And, yeah, okay, that's not really helping you develop a game, but, it is fun, and you see people in, somewhat vulnerable or silly situations, and it kind of makes you stop taking yourself so seriously, I think, which is really key.
Sometimes it's the events that happen outside of the company events, because the company events, there's still people feel obligated to go to them because it's a company event and I'm a team player, but some of the cool events that happen, like game jams or charity events, or people bring up real world issues. One of our designers just did a quest pack for a really old game that we have to raise money for BC forest fires. That's why it's so smoky outside, because of that. And that was all done on their own time. But those little events, those are when you know that your culture is working, because people are putting in that extra time and they're doing stuff that they don't have to do, that kind of falls underneath our ESG Cares banner. And then people see that and be like, can I do this, or can I do this, or maybe we should do this. And that's kind of why we did that. And those are all low cost things that people can do. You just have to be able to have the systems and tools to be able to say, run with it and do that.
So I had a question about if you had to make a hiring decision between somebody that's a good cultural fit or somebody else that might be way more proficient in the job and is going to require, less training. If you have experience in, making that decision, how did that go for each one of you? And, how did you explain that to the team who might have thought that you should have hired the other person?
Culture fit, hands down. We were talking about this yesterday. There have been instances, to jump in on that one, but it's something I feel very strongly about. But there have been instances where, especially as we were developing this culture pipeline, as we call it, where I made exceptions, or where people were like, but he has this experience, but he's coming from, or she is coming from this place. And I'm like, okay, fine, we need to build the team because we were establishing a new studio in London. Every single time they have ended up leaving, or they have ended up having to be exited or something, or it's actually more often than not, though, self-initiated leaving in these cases, because it's very evident when you come in and you're not a culture fit that you're not going to stick around. And like our CEO has said this a million times, and he says this a lot, it's like, you can be the best coder in the world, but if you're going to sit in the corner in silence, do your work, and go home at 5, you're just not going to work. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I know we talked about this yesterday, but it's the exact same thing. Every time I was sort of convinced to hire someone that I wasn't stoked on from a cultural perspective, it's always been a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so that would be my one thing, to just trust my intuition and to make sure that I fight for that.
I mean, I think that it's the thing about like this industry is it is so fast moving and it is so kind of fluid is the nice way I'm going to put it, but sometimes like you have to trust the people around you, and you have to be able to run over to someone's desk and be like, I really need you to stay and help me out with this thing tonight. And you need to be able to, you know, but also you need to be able to have fun around the people you work with. It is, and like literally we are producing fun and entertainment. You need to be entertained and having fun in the work environment. And if you're surrounded by people who take themselves too seriously or kind of a dick, like it's just not going to produce the end goal that you're looking for.
Yeah, every time I made a compromise with anything related to hiring somebody who's not a culturally a fit, it took years of my life. Like I always dearly regretted it. Mm-hmm. But that's a really valid point. Like, how do you define who's the best for the job? Like, let's say you have years of difference of experience, and you know this guy's built empires with these skills, right? Okay, it's a hard question. Like, you just have to kind of get down to the roots and ask this guy, can you fit to these cultural standpoints that we have? Can you take us, right? It's again a conversation that you really need to dig deep with the guys and just do it.
I'm changing my mind on this one a little bit. It's that I used to always be culture, and then now we've actually gone so far the other way with this good culture, but we don't have those people that maybe are a little bit too abrasive and hard to work with in the office, that we're missing something. So I think a good bridge for that is if you do go for the more qualified candidate but not a culture fit, to make sure that they understand where they're actually weak and what they're going to have to improve in. You have a solid 30-day plan for where they're going to run to. And then the other thing that you can do is you can hire both and bring the second person in that's more qualified as just like a contractor before you become part of the larger team. So we do vet all of our contractors and all of our people that we work with too, that they fall into our culture and our values, but we're a little less rigid on that. And then you can see how they actually work. Because the big thing here is a lot of people might seem like they're not a culture fit, but they just interview very poorly. And their work shows for it, and maybe their work is exactly what you need, but we never know this because we just base everything off meeting them, and some people just interview really well. Even some people can interview very well and fit into your culture, and they're just like horrible at their job. and then you've picked the candidate that's not good there. So we always pick, in our hiring now, we always kind of do the whoever we pick, we make sure we communicate with the other people that were strong candidates and stay in touch with them in case there's an opportunity, because you've already invested all that time.
We were talking about this yesterday, one thing that I'll touch on, but like being a culture fit doesn't always mean being nice. Like sometimes you need an abrasive person or someone who you can tell is just going to be like honest and straightforward with what they're doing. But at least in my opinion, like that doesn't mean they're not a culture fit. Like we have one of our really talented designers. I mean, all of our designers are talented, but one of them, he's kind of an asshole, but he's pretty central to our culture because he makes sure that kind of honest environment is maintained, to put it nicely.
All right, now I feel like I need to narrow down my question. So you mentioned opening an office in London. How hard do you guys find scaling your culture when you open a new Geographies?
It was tricky, I would say. So the original, I'm going to answer really quickly. The original office was in Istanbul. We opened in London. And the way that we ended up deciding to do it, and this is, by the way, my tenure as head of culture was pretty much from when we decided to move to London to now. So this is like, lost a lot of sleep over this. But basically, the way we decided to do it was we basically cut the studio in half in Istanbul, and took the people who were kind of the more central figures, people who had been there since the beginning, and moved them to London, which was tricky in the first place because then you get a lot of people in Istanbul thinking the people in London are getting more attention, and and it was really stressful in that way. But basically what we did was we split, moved, filled in both sides, and it was a balancing act, and it was really tricky at times. But what we ended up doing is just basically you have to ensure that everything you do in one office, you are also doing in the other office. Ensure that attention is spread exactly evenly. Ensure that, you are super, super diligent about every single day. Because the minute one studio thinks that the other studio is being prioritized, especially, this is different, with the kind of the political kind of diversity of those two regions, then you're going to lose the dedication of your employees in one office. So it's just, being diligent.
Our time is up. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
Thanks a lot, guys.